Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the UK Genesis podcast. I'm your host, Ben Furphy.
And hi, I'm Gary Jones.
And today we're joined by Angie Vale of Purple Baby Hippo, a WordPress and Genesis developer based up in the north of England. So if you have any questions for Angie, make sure you put them on Twitter. It can either be at UK Genesis or with the hashtag UKGenesis, and we will get round to asking Angie any of your questions. So why don't we start off with finding out a little bit more about our guest, Angie. Angie, just for those who don't know who you are, explain a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi, my name's Angie Vale, and my company is Purple Baby Hippo, and I'm a designer and developer working with the Genesis framework. I provide services to sort of small to medium businesses, and I also provide one-to-one WordPress and Genesis training.
Okay. So what would you consider to be your main service? Would you say that you are primarily a designer, primarily a developer, or a mix of the two, or something else altogether?
I'm a mix of the two. I used to be more of a tweaker when it came to development, but now I'm starting to do a lot more development. I'm starting to try and brush up on my coding skills, and it's an area that I want to move into more and more. But I still really like the design side as well, so I tend to do a combination of both.
Okay. And in terms of, sort of how you got into the industry, was it through design that you got into it?
No, I haven't got a design background at all. I've got more of a technical background, although not in web development. I was a manufacturing engineer for 15 years, but I built my first website back in 2004 for my husband's business. He does handmade kitchens, and that was just a static HTML website, so I kind of learned that side of things myself, really. And then I just used to do kind of static HTML sites for different people, friends, family, kind of in my spare time, because I found that I really liked being creative, but also just kind of building something that you could see. And then I was asked to have a look at a Badminton club website that I was involved with, and it was done in CSS, and I've never seen that before, and I thought, what on earth is going on here? So I decided that I needed to learn what this amazing thing was. So I learned all about CSS. Then a few years ago, I bolted a WordPress blog onto my husband's static website. So that's where I kind of first got into WordPress, and then it kind of developed from there. I just then got really interested in what you could do with WordPress. Saw that you could create not just blog type websites, but you could basically do anything that you wanted in WordPress, and that was one thing that I really liked.
Okay, that's quite interesting. How did you come across WordPress originally?
Well, originally, like I say, I'd done this website for my husband, which was just a static HTML, and then I was always looking. Very early on, I got very interested in search engine optimization. And how to basically try and get him, high up on the Google ranking. And one of the things I came across was, to basically have a lot of new content on your website. And one way to do that was to have a blog. So that's how I came upon WordPress. And then I just basically bolted the blog bit onto his static HTML site at the time. And then eventually I decided that I could just do the whole thing in WordPress. So I converted the whole thing over to WordPress.
How long was it between discovering WordPress and actually making that leap to building the whole of a website using WordPress?
Let's see. I first did his website in 2004, and then it's probably about 2008, I think, maybe, that I added the WordPress piece on, and then maybe 3 years later, I converted the whole thing over to WordPress.
Okay. And, I mean, what sort of made you pick WordPress rather than, say, one of the other CMSs out there?
I think initially it was the fact that you could use it very easily as a blog, and it just seemed to be quite simple to be able to bolt that onto an existing website. Then I used to just have a look on the internet and find these articles about all these really amazing websites that you could create in WordPress, and some of them were just so creative, and I never saw that with any of the other CMSs. I never saw that kind of, they seem to be a little bit more, I don't know, techie maybe, whereas with WordPress it seemed to be a lot more user-friendly, and you seem to be able to create, really creative and graphically appealing websites using, something that already existed.
Okay. So that's how you came across WordPress and got into web development. But I guess one of the big questions, and Joe's asked it, is how did you come to Purple Baby Hippo?
Well, that name originated from a toy of my son's. I've got it here actually. This little toy. And when I first went online, you have to have a username. So I just used the name of this toy for want of a better name at the time. So my username was always Purple Baby Hippo, all in lowercase, all one word. So then when I decided to start this as a business just over 3 years ago, I had to think of a name, and I wanted to have something that people would remember me by, because there's so many people around that do websites and this kind of thing, that I wanted, some way of people to remember the name. So I thought I would give it a try, and it seems to work, because people might not remember my name, but they always remember, well, that's the Purple Hippo lady. So it does seem to work. It seems to stick in people's minds.
So you said that you pretty much became an official business about 3 years ago.
Yeah, just
there's been quite a bit of discussion within the WordPress community about the difference between running a business and running a hobby. So what's your workflow, in terms of actually building a website? Do you have a workflow? Do you do it by the skin of your teeth? Do you have a set process that every single website goes through?
I'd say in the early days it was skin of my teeth, but I've developed a quite a kind of strict process, and it's kind of getting stricter. Every project that I do, I've learned. Originally I didn't have a contract, but now I have a contract that I've drawn up, and I've added things to it and tailored it based on my experience. So yeah, I have quite a strict kind of flow that I go through with a client now, from start to finish.
What's the worst thing that sort of happened to you before you put the process in place? If you can talk about it.
Yeah, nothing really bad happened. I just found that potentially, things could happen. For example, especially going through the process where you're coming up with a design, and then the client is wanting to change it. It's how do you define a minor change as opposed to a major change? How do you make sure that that initial meeting, which I kind of call my needs analysis meeting, that the client is giving you all the information that you need to actually have a good chance of coming up with something that's going to work for them. That they're in the right position, and they're giving you the right information, so that they've really focused on it. That it's not just a sort of they've sort of just scribbled something down quickly. That they understand that it's important that you get all the information that you need, because you're about to invest a lot of time and effort into coming up with something. So it's those kind of things really. It's just sort of nailing it all down really. So then if there is queries and questions later on, you can always refer back to, well, this is the contract and this is what we agreed, and then there can be no argument, hopefully.
Okay. If you could go back 3 and a bit years and tell your new yourself is starting the business the one thing you've learned that has either had the best impact or sort of has avoided having a big impact, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think it would be believe that you can do it. don't assume that everybody else out there knows all the answers, that there's some kind of magic remedy or one book that you can buy or one tutorial or something, and then everybody's just got it like that. That in fact we're all learning all the time. That's one big lesson that I've learned, is that we're all at different levels, and I'm in a completely different level to where I was 3 years ago. But even in a short space of time, I knew and was able to help a lot of people. Even when I started, because I've been dabbling for several years, you're already in a position where you can help people, and you never stop learning, and that we help each other, which is one of the great things about the Genesis community.
Brilliant. Okay, so just in case you've joined us a little bit late, we are talking to Angie Vale of Purple Baby Hippo. If you want to get any questions in, you can do the usual way, which is Twitter. You can either do it at UK Genesis or with the hashtag UK Genesis, and we will ask a question. So, I mean, just following on from that previous question, what would you say is your workflow? Sorry, not workflow. Sorry. What tools do you use for managing the projects? Do you have sort of a set tool that you use, or do you sort of just do it in Excel or Word or some other way?
I've just started using Basecamp to manage projects on a particular project that I'm working on at the moment, because there's a few people involved. And I came across it actually doing some work for another agency, local agency, and they used it, and that's how I got to find out about it. So then I thought that this project, because there's a few people involved and we're kind of spread out a little bit, that it would be a good tool to use. But
okay.
I don't really use any other tools at the moment, but I've got a kind of list of different things that I want to look at that I know other people use.
Okay. I mean, what would you use for things like invoicing and quotes and time tracking, or do you just, do you just do that in Word?
I've used Harvest a little bit for time tracking. You're probably going to ask me about about what sort of pricing I use in a moment, but for just to keep a track on how many hours I've spent on something in particular, because people can hire me sort of per hour or per day, particularly for kind of implementation of an existing Genesis thing, for example. I do quite a bit of that for people, so I've used Harvest to keep an eye on that on time. With regards to invoicing at the moment, I'm using an app called Cashew, which I have on my iPad, which is why I started using it, because it was just nice and easy. And also it syncs, online as well. But I'm now probably going to be moving to Xero at some point, because my accounts are sort of getting a little bit more involved and I haven't really got time to do it. I'm probably going to be looking at using Xero.
Okay. I mean, you touched upon, sort of pricing in that sense. I mean, do you just use fixed and hourly rates with everything, or I mean, what would you say is the difference between someone, if somebody is asking you how much something was costing and you were working out whether you're going to charge them hourly or whether you're going to do fixed pricing, what would be the crucial thing that would make you decide one or the other?
For hourly pricing, it's if somebody's come to me and first of all, if they want some training or some help on a specific thing, then I charge by the hour, or it's a little bit cheaper if they hire me for the whole day. Sometimes out of that, what will happen is I might spend 2 hours training someone on how to change a logo, or do a little bit of styling on their style sheet, and then they decide they want to hire me to change the theme to a nice Genesis theme. So in that situation, and it's usually if they've got an existing WordPress site, it's quite simple, so there's not like hundreds of pages or loads of content. It's something that I can do in a day, so I will do an hourly rate for that kind of thing. But if someone comes to me and they're wanting a whole a custom design, a custom website, the whole service, the whole process, then I don't I'm not quite there with value-based pricing, but it's, you know, more like a project-based price.
Okay. And I mean, you mentioned custom versus customization. What would you usually sort of describe as a break between those? I mean, you know, obviously, depending on who you talk to, customization can be changing the, you know, sort of the structure of an element on a work, you know, Genesis theme, or it could be just changing the color and the font type. I mean, what's your sort of interpretation of customization, and what's the limit of customization versus custom?
That's a very good point, because it can be a bit of a grey area actually.
It's one that I'm battling with at the moment, so you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have got into this situation where and the more I've learned, you know, sometimes it is hard to hold back with the customization, because you want to just, you know, do it all. But, you know, if I'm doing something where it's kind of more in a training capacity, or, you know, and often it's sitting with somebody and we kind of do it together, then I consider things like, you know, obviously adding their own logo and adding their own colours to the navigation bar. I don't consider adding new widget areas necessarily. I might add one maybe, but I wouldn't go any further to that, and it would be something quite simple. So yeah, I have kind of got a rule list as such, but it can get a little bit fuzzy.
Okay. I mean, you sort of touched upon the type of clients that, you know, will want to change their own logo and do a little bit of CSS tweaking. I mean, what would you say is your typical client or your target client? You know, are they the same? You know, are you finding yourself dealing with a lot of bloggers but actually want to deal with small businesses? Do you know, target small businesses and work with small businesses?
I've just got my first kind of blogging job, you know, for a blogger. Actually, I haven't done any websites for bloggers as such. Oh no, I did do one actually last year, but not as much. It's been more small businesses, and I kind of get two types of people really. I get the people who come to me for the training, and they're the ones that either are on a budget, so you know they would rather. They've maybe tried to set up a WordPress site themselves. Typically, they have already had a go themselves and found that they've hit a brick wall, and they would rather spend the money and have someone sitting with them, you know, holding their hand through the process, rather than trying to trawl through the internet finding, you know, different tutorials and not necessarily knowing whether they're being told the right thing. They want, you know, an actual real person to help them. So I get those type of people, but then I also get small business owners who, and I'm getting more of this kind of thing actually recently, where they want a custom built website, and you know, they want it to help to improve their business, to sell more of their product or whatever it is. So they're not interested in tweaking or adding logos. They want to be able to maintain it to a certain extent themselves. So if they've got a portfolio, to be able to update that themselves and keep their news section up to date, but they're not interested in, you know, wanting to tweak it any further than that. So it's kind of the sort of two areas really that I get involved in.
Okay. So one last question before we move on to the next section. One question from Claire. What has been your favorite web design project to work on, and why?
Well, the one that I'm now about to start, I'm really looking forward to starting. It's for two garden designers. So I'm quite looking forward to actually starting that. I mean, I've liked them all, to be honest. I get quite excited about starting a new project, and they're all so different as well. The ones that I've got to build have all been very different. And one of the things I do like is finding out about the business. You know, I really like to get into understanding what a person's business is, what it is they sell, what it is they do. I find that bit really interesting, and I find that helps me when it comes to actually designing and developing the website, to actually understand what their business is and meet the people who run that business.
Okay, Gary.
Yep, all sounds very good. Now, Angie, we first kind of met at met in real life at the WordCamp Birmingham. So talk a little bit about kind of the WordCamps. That was your first WordCamp?
Yes, it was.
And how did you find it?
Really good. Yeah, I must admit I was a little bit nervous about going. I had decided, I wrote on my blog that I was going to go to one this year, but I was a little bit nervous because I didn't really know what to expect. But my initial impression was just that everybody was really friendly, and I think it helped the fact that I went as part of the Genesis group, and we had the meetup, initially on the Friday, and I got to meet everybody, like yourselves, who had already been to WordCamps before. But yeah, it was so useful. I can't stress that enough, really, how useful I found it, much more than I thought I would.
What were the kind of top 2 or 3 things that you got out of attending the WordCamp, either the sessions or the general atmosphere?
The general atmosphere, certainly. The talks were all really good. There was little bits of information, that I got that I didn't know. Some of it I did know, but it was still really good to sort of sit there and listen to it again. But I think the best part was actually meeting you guys, other developers, and just comparing notes and realising that the way you do things is the same as a lot of other people, or they might do something slightly different that you think that sounds really good. I need to have a look into that. So it kind of improves your own process, or gives you ideas of things that you can look at, and also just to put me in touch with people that that can help me. In the future.
Is that kind of why you wanted to attend a WordCamp in the first place? Why you blogged that you said you're going to go to one?
One of the reasons, yeah, it was to. I really wanted to meet a lot of other people that do a similar thing to me, just to kind of have that connection, but also with the idea that I might be able to, get people to do work for me if I need it in the future.
Okay, are there any local WordPress meetup groups near you?
No, there's no WordPress meetups. There's a group called Suffolk Internet Marketing Specialists, SIMS, which is quite a big networking group which happens every month. And I've been to a few of those. A lot of local business people go to that, even if they're not in the techie industry. They still go to it. It's mainly to do with SEO, but they do touch on actually not just WordPress, Joomla, and all sorts of different things. So there's quite a lot of people that go to that. It's quite a big thing, but no specific WordPress meetups that I know of.
Is it something you might consider trying to start yourself? Kind of perhaps informally at first, just finding out a couple of other local WordPress folks in your area, and then just meeting up for coffee and taking it from there?
I do know of other people locally that use WordPress. They're not Genesis, but most web design companies use WordPress now anyway. They don't really advertise the fact that they use it, but they do use it. But it might be something that I consider in the future. It just depends on. Yeah, it just depends really how people view WordPress and how they work with it, I think. I need to find the right sort of people that would be interested in a meeting like that. I think maybe more freelancers. I think it might be a good thing. So yeah, I'll have to hunt some down.
Yep. And what's the best thing about kind of being in the Genesis community?
I think how friendly everybody is, how helpful everybody is, encouraging. And what I really like is that people that work with Genesis, certainly in the Slack group, are very keen to develop their own skills and to use best practice, and to use new tools and the best tools, and to be they seem to be a very conscientious group of people who really want to produce good quality code, good quality websites, and do the best for their clients. And there's often this thing about making it easy for the client to update their content, for example. So that's one of the things that really impresses me about people in the Genesis community.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Is that like-minded but not identical, kind of identically minded people means you get slightly different viewpoints, and people have tried different tools and so on. So it's a nice meeting point and a nice hub to improve everyone to improve themselves in different ways. So somebody might be a great developer, might not be so hot at the business side, and vice versa, and so on. So there's plenty to gain from being part of a group like the Genesis Slack group.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Is there any negativity or something you'd like to see disappear within the Genesis or the WordPress communities?
I haven't come across anything negative in the Genesis community, I have to say, not at all. I mean, if you talk about WordPress, I'd like to see Internet Explorer 7 and 8 disappear. I know that's not WordPress specific, but that is a bit of a thorn in my side sometimes. But I mean, in general, WordPress, you do tend to get, there is this idea that because it's open source, therefore free, that that can kind of devalue often what we do, and that there is a big difference between somebody just grabbing a free thing, sticking a few free plugins, and away you go. There's a big difference between that and somebody that takes time to understand the person's business to come up with a design, and whether it's in WordPress or whatever is irrelevant really, but because it's WordPress, it's kind of has this idea that it's somehow free, and that people shouldn't be paying for people's time. Whereas there's a lot more, there's a lot more to it. There's things like accessibility to consider. There's things like different browsers, all the testing that you have to do. It isn't just a case of grabbing a load of free stuff, chucking it together, and there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And just March 23rd, there was a post on talkmag.io. It says, "Are you a WordPress developer? You may be bringing service rate down," and it goes into that exact point about that there's a differentiation between kind of a developer and an implementer, and that an implementer who calls himself a developer, so an implementer is probably kind of the lower rates and the less kind of technical skill, shall we say, compared to the developer. But an implementer who calls himself a developer, kind of, it brings the rates down because there's this lack of understanding between kind of what these two different roles are, between adding a few plugins and a few kind of copy and paste customizations into a theme, and kind of writing a whole custom plugin from scratch that a developer might do. So there's exactly that on there. And to follow up on that, and it does link from this post, there's a Bulgarian developer, Mario Peshev, and he was sent to lead, and he's blogged about it. He was sent to lead that the potential lead said, "Oh, well, I bought this theme. It was $25, and I'd like these customizations. There were some kind of SQL changes, something a bit quite complex in there. I bought it for $25. Therefore, I estimate the job will be $15 for something that's kind of completely complex." And I think kind of Mario costed it up as kind of, it could be $1,000 or $2,000 and so on. So there's this complete disconnection between the expectations and kind of reality as we know it. So yeah, I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
How do you see WordPress changing in the next 5 years? So that could be this expectation that we're giving to the community, or kind of the software itself, the features, and how it's moving forwards. How do you see that changing?
I think that one of the things we might see is more of the kind of Rainmaker type platforms where there's kind of one solution, where the hosting, the maintenance, there's a few themes that you can choose from, but it's all there within a dashboard, within a control panel, so that people don't have to worry too much about security and hosting and that kind of thing. But I always, as with Rainmaker, I think that will only appeal to a certain group of people. I think there's still you know, a lot of businesses need a lot more flexibility and a lot more customization, but I can see more of that kind of thing coming along. Also, I think, you know, there's going to be an easier way of making the content flexible. We've seen it with advanced custom fields, this idea of giving clients the flexibility to be able to change their content around, but without messing things up, you know, making it easy so that it still looks good. But, you know, that kind of idea of the flexible content, I think we're going to see more of.
Do you think that's kind of advanced custom fields or custom meta boxes too and so on? Is that something you'd see, you think might come into core? Is that something you use lots? Kind of what's your...
It is something I'm using more and more. Yeah, because you need to, really, if you want to create a site that's got a lot of customizations in it, but which is easy for the client to be able to update themselves. And also, you know, even just things like adding images that, you know, then it's not going to be easily broken by someone accidentally putting a space in, or, you know, not putting something in the right line or something like that. So you really need to use them, you know, more. So yeah, I think we'll see them being used more and more. I don't know whether it'll ever end up in the core or not. Possibly with, you know, the meta boxes too, custom meta boxes too. Maybe that might go into the core eventually. I don't know.
I'd be cautious about that type of thing going into the core, though. To be honest, I think it falls very much under Brian Gardner's sort of approach to Genesis itself, where that type of added functionality should stay as a plugin, in the sense that, you know, if it's something that's being updated in the core, then, you know, every time that there's going to be an update, we have to wait until the core gets updated before we see new functionality. And I think that's part of the problem, is that custom boxes, especially ones that are done by CMB2 and ACF, are still evolving at a rate that is far faster than the core could cope with. So I think at least for the next couple of years, I don't think we're going to see it go into the core, and nor should we want it to. There's questions as well of whether it's right, whether it's the type of thing that we really want to be giving, you know, sort of DIYers and, you know, sort of new people to Genesis the ability to actually do it with, because there is still at the moment quite a bit of PHP that's involved, especially with some of the more advanced features. And, you know, as we all know from when we've learned PHP ourselves, it's very easy to break a site and find yourself in a situation where that site is completely broken, and at your level of understanding, there's no way for you to fix it.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. Yeah, I think that it does need to stay as a plugin. And, you know, one of the things that the Slack channel has helped me with is using advanced custom fields, is to remove the front end dependency, which is one thing that I've been doing recently, and that's really helped me get to grips with coding as well, and understanding, rather than just relying on the get field, you know, actually understanding what's happening. And it's really quite satisfying to disable the ACF plugin and see that your site still works. So yeah, it's I agree with that.
Gary, just a quick question. Obviously, I mean, we all know that front-end dependency is a bad thing, but you and a couple of people working on a plugin, I think it's TCPM, is it? The
TGM plugin activation.
TGM plugin. Is it potentially possible to include that within a custom theme that you develop, for it to basically say, this theme requires ACF to work correctly, or is that not really what it would be for?
Yep, TGM is a plugin, or it's a library, so a single file at the moment. We're just about to kind of head into version 3, which will split out into a whole load of other extra files. But TGM plugin activation.com, I think, is the site that we've lead you to the actual source code. That allows you to specify kind of either locally included plugins, so plugins that are included within the theme, but as separate files, or the functionality within separate files, but includes the plugin, so that can be kind of activated, copied across and activated directly. Or you can say, well, if it's on the WordPress.org repo that you want this particular plugin slug to do it, and so when you activate the theme, then it puts an admin notice across the top, so that somebody who isn't familiar with the theme can immediately spot that and give them kind of one-click, two-click access to install the plugins that the theme has either said is required or recommended. So there's a couple of different levels, and I think we're going to add a third level in there as well. So yes, if you say, right, this theme needs ACF, then you can either include a copy with that. Obviously, you need to be careful of any licensing issues if you include in the pro version, or if you're just using the light version or just the version that's on the WordPress.org repo, then you can just say, I just need advanced custom fields, and that will kind of give an admin notice for the user to install it straight away. So it's certainly possible. I mean, even within the, because I've got a site that I'm working on at the moment, and that has got ACF get field all throughout, and you could go along. There's a kind of couple of technical ways you could try and work around it. Is that the get field is probably the majority of the kind of front end dependency, and so you could, in theory, before you call get field, is you could do an if function exists every time. But obviously, you don't really want to kind of litter your code with all this function exists check. So what you could do instead is say, if a function does not exist, then call create or define a function called get field that has a very simple kind of wrapper for get post meta. I know the actual ACF version of get field does a whole lot more. It actually will kind of grab objects, not just kind of the actual post meta values. But as if you're not using it to grab extra objects, kind of entries that relate to custom post types that are related to each other, and you're just doing it for kind of static string or numerical values, then you could just do define your own get field if it doesn't exist, and just wrap it as a get post meta. So that's a simpler way around it as well.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, we've got a couple of questions coming over on Twitter. So if you just joined us late, we're talking to Angie Vale from Purple Baby Hippo, based in Ipswich, UK Genesis user and designer and developer. So if you've got any questions, send them over Twitter, UK Genesis hashtag, and we'll try and get them asked. So we've got one question from Devinda. Say, do clients proactively want accessibility feature, or do you pitch it to clients as an extra add-on service? So this is kind of, what's your viewpoint on accessibility, and how much are the clients asking for it, and how much are you pushing it?
I've only had one client ask for it, and that was the type of work they did. They actually worked with people with disabilities and special needs, so it's quite high up on their agenda. But other than that, I will tell people when I through the meetings with them, I'll tell people that I will design and develop the website to be as accessible as possible, and that I will test it for accessibility. It's at that point where they go, oh yeah, that's a good idea, because often people don't necessarily think about it. But I never have anyone say, well, I don't want to pay extra for you to do that, but I don't charge it as an extra thing. It's just in with the price, so I don't separate it. I mention it, and it's in the proposal and in the workflow that's what I would do, and that I will test it. But I don't say for me to do it. So it's not accessible, will cost you this. If you want it accessible, then it's going to cost you an extra, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and absolutely, that should be the way it is. I mean, for now, pretty much most websites will build responsive. Some people might charge extra, but majority no. So no, that's what a website should be. It should be responsive, and in the same way, it should be accessible. So I agree with that. What's your kind of testing procedure for testing the various aspects of accessibility on the site?
I use the voice control built in Mac. I've also got a couple of websites that I use the standard Wave, is it? Wave,
Wave
the
accessibility
Wave website.
toolbar.
And then there was one that you did a link to in Slack. I can't remember the name of it, but
Tenon.
Yes, Yeah.
Tenon.io, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So they're the ones that I use at the moment. A sort of combination of them and tabbing myself, through the various different things to see if it works. And yeah, but again, it's something that I'm kind of learning about all the time, every time that I do a site.
Yeah, one of the things I have got, and it's not an automated tool like that, which they are very useful, because obviously there's some things that you can't test to do with accessibility. So a lot of it has to be like a manual testing, just make it a manual decision. Is that sufficiently accessible or not? And so one of the things I've got here is a web accessibility checklist. So alllyproject.com/checklist.html. So accessibilityproject.com. And that's a beginner's guide to web accessibility, and there's almost and there are kind of checkboxes that you can kind of go through and say, well, do you have kind of ARIA landmarks? Do you have a language attribute, which if you use in WordPress you will do? Is the document outline kind of using semantic heading and structure? There's a useful kind of Google Chrome extension for that as well, the HTML5 outliner.
Yeah, I just learned about recently.
Kind of using appropriate alt attribute values, make sure your JavaScript is unobtrusive and kind of the site works with no JavaScript enabled, and kind of handling media, audio and video and so on.
Keyboard trap. I learned about that.
Yeah, keyboard trap. So
that's frightening.
Yeah, if you can to be accessible, obviously you just need to be able to tab through and be able to access everything in the right tab order that make kind of logical sense. And if you have things like kind of pop-ups or stuff like that, then you want to make sure that the focus does actually go on to that pop-up modal dialog box and so on. So there's a lot to consider, and kind of color contrast and kind of form text and labels and so on. So there's a lot to consider. But once you kind of know the basics, then I think every web developer and designer should be accounting for those issues when they're building.
It's hard work to begin with, but it's like anything. Once it's in your head, then right from the word go, you're thinking about it. So you're building it in. You're building it in from the word go. So and then it becomes normal. So it's just it's just training your mind to it, really.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question from Pilcrow and Pixel from Vaughan, and he asks, clients may know WordPress, but how do you sell to them the reasons for using Genesis when they may not know it?
What I tend to do is briefly explain that I use the Genesis framework, and they look at me a bit blankly, and then I just explain that it's very so well from my point of view, it's good. It's good because it allows me to, I have a solid framework which is very secure, which is going to be updated in line with WordPress, so I don't have to worry about that things. And it's very flexible, so it's based like I have building blocks that I can then build a very customized website for people, knowing that the framework underneath is robust and secure. From the client's point of view, that means you're going to get a website which is you're going to have a confidence that it's good, it's robust, and it's as future-proof as it can be because it's got a solid foundation. So I just kind of explain those terms really.
Yep. Okay, Ben, do you want to come back in there?
Yeah, one thing I actually found quite interesting, so I was trying to remember exactly who it was, at WordCamp London, mentioned, now obviously, I mean, there are various people who are, let's not say anti-Genesis, but they're anti-framework. One thing that I was very surprised at, I think it was David Lockie, it might have been Harry, but it was probably David Lockie, I'm pretty sure. But he turned around and he interestingly said that he will not hire anybody who, if he interviews people and he finds out that they aren't using a framework, it doesn't necessarily have to be Genesis, it just has to be a framework. But if they're not using a framework, if they're not using things like Sass, he won't hire them. Because at the end of the day, these are tools that are designed to make it quicker and easier. Gary was saying then, for example, WordPress, one of the benefits for using WordPress is it automatically sets your language for accessibility in the same way that Genesis sets up various other aspects. But anyway, getting back to the questions. So we're going to do our new quick fire round. We've been building up to it for the last couple of episodes, but so you ready, Jack? You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea, and I still don't really know.
Well, I haven't grown up yet.
No,
okay.
I didn't really have. I didn't, necessarily want to be a kind of nurse, or I didn't really have any idea, to be honest. When I was younger, I was too busy out playing and having fun instead of thinking about the future.
Fair enough. Do you use a Mac or a PC?
I was a PC, but I'm a Mac.
Okay. What code editor do you use?
Sublime Text.
Sublime Text, okay.
2 or 3?
3.
Fair enough.
Only Jest.
Yeah, same with me as well. I think Gary uses 3, don't you?
I'm on Sublime Text 3 as well, yeah.
Yeah. What do you use localhost, or do you host your development sites online?
Desktop server I use. Good
choice. Well, I suppose that answers the next question. What do you use to deploy websites?
Desktop server.
Do you design wireframe, do mock-ups?
What I do at the moment is I tend to draw it out on a piece of paper, and if I'm designing it, then I will build it in the browser. Although I'm now starting to try and look at learning how to use Sketch, because I don't have a graphic design background. I've never learned how to use Photoshop or anything like that.
It's a lot easier to use Sketch than it is Photoshop. I'll say that.
Yes, that's why I'm going to look at that.
What's your must-have plugin or go-to plugins? Well, in fact, actually, you use Desktop Server. What are the plugins that you have installed on your blueprint?
Advanced Custom Fields Pro.
Okay.
I haven't got Gravity Forms as a blueprint because I don't always use it, but it is, if I need other than a very, very simple contact form, then I'll use Gravity Forms.
Okay.
Genesis Simple Share, Genesis Accessibility. I've just recently used Gary's Genesis Header Nav plugin, which I like when you've got your navigation, on the right header. WordPress SEO, obviously, I use that pretty much for every site. Someone's adamant that they don't want SEO, which, believe it or not, some people are adamant that they don't want it. So yeah, that's probably most of them. Okay.
Do you have a starter theme for Genesis, or do you use a Genesis theme off the shelf?
It depends on the project. I mean, if it's a project, and there's an existing theme which is pretty near to it, and again, if it's kind of more of a training thing, then it will definitely be something off the shelf. I am working on my own kind of starter theme, which is based on the Genesis sample theme, and I'm tweaking it. But every time I do that, then I start a project. Then there's a load of other stuff that I wished I'd put into the start theme. So then I'm starting again. So it's kind of evolving.
Have you ever written a public plugin?
No.
No. Any plans to?
Maybe. Yeah. When I. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd like to in the future. Is the answer.
Have you ever written a public theme?
No.
No. What would you like to see changed in Genesis? Is there anything in particular you'd like to see changed?
Not really, no. I mean, there's a few things that we know about in terms of like the accessibility, which I think there's some changes coming up where that's going to be built in. I think that would be really good to have that built in. I think that is something that should be built into the framework. But I'm like you, Ben. I don't think there should be too many options and things in there. I think it should be kept quite light, and for us to add stuff on as we need it.
Okay. I know we've touched upon this, but we'll go back over it. How much do you consider accessibility, internationalization, localization, and right-to-left scripts when creating themes for clients?
At the moment, I've only really been in a position where I need to consider accessibility. I haven't needed to consider any of those other things at the moment, but you know, it's good to know that they're there and that the options are there when those projects do come along.
Okay. Right, so we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of this fortnight show. If you've got any other questions for Angie, you can either drop them using the hashtag UKGenesis or tweet to us at UKGenesis. We've got a couple more questions. One from Nia. What is your favorite, or what are your favorite tools for when developing a site from scratch? So if you had a client who came to you with, say, an unlimited budget, maybe, or a decent budget, and said, "I want a custom website," what tools would you use?
Well, I'd develop it on desktop server. I would really get someone to do the design. I've got a friend of mine who's a graphic designer, so I would get her to do the design, and then I would do the development. Advanced Custom Fields Pro. I would probably look at doing all sorts of clever, flexible content for them. And there's also that plugin that is it WP1, which gives
WP101.
Is that the one that gives you the training?
Yeah, the videos, the WP101.
So yeah, that looks quite good as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I've found WP101 and Troy Dean's user video manuals to be very, very useful for sites that you haven't really customized a huge amount. Obviously, if you put in a ton of ACF fields and change the way the admin thing looks, not necessarily the best solution, but it's good for if you've got that type of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be more for the standard stuff.
Okay. Question from Devinda. Do you use any page builders for client sites? And second part of that question is, do clients specifically ask for certain things like custom meta boxes or any other particular functions?
I've never used a page builder. I've helped, I've done training with people who have page builder plugins within a site. I'm not a fan of them, if I'm honest. I think they do, they are good, in some specs. What I tend to do for people from the training point of view is I'll install just Genesis simple columns and just show them how to do that if they're wanting to just split up some content, in a very simple way, just sort of text in 2 different columns and that kind of thing.
Okay. And one last question from Ginger. Do you offer any maintenance packages to your clients?
Yes, I do. In fact, the majority of sites that I've built, the clients have wanted me to carry on maintaining it, doing all the updates. So I've actually got a kind of contract that a yearly contract that they can renew with me every year, and I charge either an annual or a monthly fee. I'm now looking at ways of being able to manage that a little bit better, maybe using main WP or WP main, something like that, because I'm sort of getting an ever-growing number of sites that I have to look after and do all the updates.
Well, what sort of price do you charge for that type of thing? I mean, obviously I know it depends on the type of client, but ballpark figure?
Roughly about £45 a month.
Okay. And do you find any clients sort of scoff at that price, or sort of are you looking to even increase it in the next couple of months?
Some clients, early ones, I'm sort of trying to put it up gradually because I probably didn't really know what was involved myself, to be honest, in terms of keeping things up to date and how time consuming it can be. I've only had one client who said, well, actually, no, I think I'd rather look after things myself. And some people that I do training for want to then look after themselves, and so I will as part of the training, I'll show them how to do that. But sometimes then I've had a couple recently that contacted me and said, I don't seem to be getting anywhere with the search engine optimization, and then when I've looked at their site, when they've done the update, they haven't reactivated the plugin. So it's little things like that really. Whereas if £45 a month is not really a lot to pay somebody just to know that everything's taken care of, and that's what I'm sort of trying to sell to people, that they don't have to worry about it. That's all taken care of, and also that includes backups as well.
What's that great quote? I think it was Chris Lemmer had on one of his inspiration videos about the babysitter who was shocked at how much he was paying her per hour, and he said, "I'm not paying you for you. I'm paying how much it's worth for me to be able to go out for dinner with my wife and not have to worry." So I think that's a great example.
Just a question for me, Angie. Where would you like to see, or how would you like to see your business grow within the next year?
I like the path that I'm now taking. I'm getting bigger, more interesting projects to work on, and it's helping me develop my development skills. So I'm getting to grips with the code a lot more. So it's kind of, I'm challenging myself in that respect. Also, I like, people involved. So it's, getting someone to do the design. So working with a sort of more of a group of people on a project, rather than just me sort of trying to do everything.
Okay.
Excellent.
Right, so heading into the last 4 or 5 minutes or so. So just as a heads up, in 2 weeks' time, fortnight, we will be interviewing Vaughan from Peelcroft and Pixel. Sorry, Vaughan, I keep getting your thing around the wrong way all the time. So that's in about 2 weeks' time on Wednesday. What I would also say is that if you have got any questions for Vaughan, do get them in advance with the usual way, either hashtag UKGenesis or at UKGenesis, and we'll be able to ask them straight away. So start wrapping up. Angie, who would you like to see on the podcast in the near future?
You can't say Vaughan Simmons. Silence.
No, nice to see Vaughan on here in a couple of weeks' time. James from Llama Press. That would be good to have him on here if he can get the afternoon off.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Or just anybody really. Everyone should do this.
Okay. Where can people find you online?
Website purplebabyhippo.co.uk, on Twitter at purplebabyhippo. I'm also in Slack. Yeah, and on Google and on my website. It's got like about 10 different ways to contact me.
Okay, and yeah, obviously that is it for another show. Thank you very much, Angie, for joining us. If you have any questions for Vaughan, who will be on in 2 weeks, do drop us them on Twitter, and we will do our best to answer them. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you for the folks who did send questions in. Appreciate it, and thanks for watching.
Those of you who didn't, next time, please. Right, we will see everyone in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.